All right, we are live. Good morning, Decred dorks all around the world, wherever you are listening to this. Welcome back to another episode of Staked Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about Decred, focus primarily on Decred, but I do also talk about some other cryptocurrency projects from time to time because I live record these on my YouTube channel, East Corner. Many of you guys probably do not know that, but if you are tuning in to Stake Podcast for the first time and you'd like to watch a live recording, you can head over to my YouTube channel, subscribe. I record these just about every Monday. So, no, not just about every Monday morning. It is 4:42 a.m. Oklahoma time. Hello to Sean in the live stream. Hello, hello. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to check the Decred Block Explorer. DCRdata.decred.org. We are at proposed block 484720. That is 484,720,000. The current ticket price of Decred is 149.64 DCR. And there's a total of 6 million staked DCR. That is, yes, we have done it. We have finally done it, you all. We have crossed 12 million coins mined. Congratulations to the entire Decred community. Very exciting. We have half of that, more than half of that staked. 50.79% of circulating supply is staked. And I'm very excited because I need to make sure that I talk about that today. Whenever today's episode, we are going to be talking about why I invested in Decred. I'm doing this really from the head, heart, and the hip, shooting from the hip, just off the Chrome Dome. There's really no, what am I saying? I don't have like an agenda really. I'm just going to kind of talk to you guys about my thoughts. And I really want to apologize for last time whenever I was blowing my nose a whole bunch. I went back and listened to it and it was so disgusting. So if I have to do that again, I will make sure to pause now that I know how to mute myself. The exchange rate of Decred is $13.79. And the hash rate is at 377 petahashes. We're going to jump right into it, guys. I do want to encourage you guys to make sure that you are, liking, rating, commenting on the podcast. Now that I'm moving into episode 4, I feel like this is legit. I need you guys to start trying to help me get this, more aware and make sure that it's getting in people's algorithm. And the way that's going to happen is by liking, rating, and also please leave a donation of Atom tips. There's a tipping address in the description. It's all over the place on Twitter. It really helps me, guys. I am a loyal Decred holder. All Atom tips do not get converted to anything. They go straight into my savings account where I'm saving up for a Decred ticket. And even just a donation of 10 million atoms, which is about $2, less than $2 really, 0.1 DCR goes a very long ways for me. And it just keeps encouraging me to, keep doing this and come back. And I mean, I would do it even without the donations, but it definitely helps out. So please make sure you are supporting me if that is your prerogative. Okay. Why did I invest in Decred? I don't want to get too much into my story necessarily. I want to make sure that I'm focusing on Decred. And so far we've talked about, the history, we've talked about the Constitution, and to answer that question, I do have to go back to my college years, and I'll do this part very briefly. But whenever I was a sophomore at university, I met this kid who many of you guys will probably know. His name is Murad. And one night, it was late at night, I remember, I think he was just about to head to China. And Murad was a very eccentric guy. Um, and I, being from small town Oklahoma, was very small minded. And we were all hanging out, right? And I think we had just got done with a night of partying. And Murad starts talking to me about Bitcoin. And he starts telling me about how Bitcoin has the power to shut down governments and it'll replace the US dollar one day. And this is in 2013, I think. Had to have been 2013. Maybe it was 12, but it was one of those years. And it might have been my freshman year either, but I just thought this dude was a lunatic at the time. And I mean, I thought what he was saying was extremely interesting, but I didn't really think anything of it. But then I go the rest of my undergraduate years. At one point, I see someone who's like mining Bitcoin. Another one of my friends, I just kind of ignored it. I remember whenever Bitcoin ran up to $1,000 for the first time, and it was like all over like my Twitter timeline. There's like advertisements all over the web, and I just ignored it. And then I finished school, or I got expelled in 2017, and at that time, as many of you guys know, there was a bull market just getting started, and I was working for a solar energy company. And one of my coworkers, he mentions to me this thing called Ripple. And I had just started making a little bit of money, my first job. I had some money left over, and I decided I needed to invest. And so he tells me about this thing called Ripple. I have a video of the day that I bought Ripple. I literally recorded myself because I'm a weirdo and I've been recording myself for a very long time now. But I bought some Ripple, and that year it went like 100x. I bought in at like 17 cents and went to $3 and I sold. And I didn't really like know any TA. I just sold. I was like, this is frothy and I've made more money than I expected I would. I really just need to get out of this. And so I did. Just so happens that we were in a massive Bitcoin bubble at that time. And I remember coming back to Oklahoma, and I was thinking so much about this crypto stuff and I just couldn't get it off my mind. After you make money in something, it's interesting. You end up going and like diving into it a lot more. And so I hit up my friend Murad and I was like, what's going on in this space? Like, what is like, I remember you were the first person to ever say something to me about Bitcoin. What is going on? And Murad sends me this like Excel sheet of like basically every project that he's read the white papers for and done like a thorough analysis. And Murad is a very, very smart guy. And he's much more intelligent than I. And I was like, okay, like there's something here. And he starts talking to me about this project and this project and da 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 da. And like it was so overwhelming. But at the end of the day, he's like, you need to read this book. So he sends me this book. And this book is called The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous, which I'm positive if you're watching this, you've probably read that book. And so, yeah, I read it. I read that book, and that was kind of my aha moment, honestly, was that book. And Bitcoin starts coming down from its 20,000 high. And me, like, not really knowing anything, I just was like, okay, I know that if you believe in something, you're supposed to dollar cost average. So I literally started dollar cost averaging down from 20,000. And that was how I got into Bitcoin. And as happened to many of noobs, many people who were the 2017 class of Bitcoiners, the newly initiated, Bitcoin hasn't been around long enough to know if this is a trend or not, but I imagine that in this next hype cycle, we'll really get to see how it plays out. But essentially, people get attracted to cryptocurrency because of the price action and like massive gains from projects that like typically don't really have much there. And then they end up sticking around for Bitcoin. And so I became kind of like Bitcoin maximalistic during this time. I was listening to a lot of noted podcasts. Shout out Pierre Richard. He was heavily influential on my thinking very early on. I started reading a lot of Austrian economics. Let me see what's on there. Man, Economy and State by Murray Rothbard. I read that. Human Action. I read Human Action. Economics in One Lesson. Yeah, I just started reading a bunch of economics books, and that was honestly how I got interested in economics. Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. And I didn't really know. I just knew that I was very curious about making money. And I want to start there because I'm about to sneeze. I swear, it's something about Monday mornings because I went and looked the rest of the week and like, okay, am I as like sneezy and nasally other days of the week? I swear on Monday it's the worst. That's when I became interested in economics. I started teaching myself. I started trying to consume as much content as possible on YouTube. I watched every YouTube video that there possibly was. It got so bad I was re-listening to episodes. And yeah, it was truly just an intellectual journey of like curiosity, and it still has been. And that's what I like so much about this space is that I feel like I just continue to learn and challenge myself. And there's never a shortage of things to learn. So I would say somewhere around the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, I had really become hardcore Bitcoiner. Bitcoin had been like in a very deep bear market. I spent most of that bear market regretting the shit coins I had diversified into after my gains from Ripple. I bought a whole bunch of other shit coins, and then I just watched those bleed out to like 95% of their value was gone. But I just kept buying Bitcoin. So all the way down to 3,000, just kept buying. In my head, I thought it was going to $1,000. I was like, that's what I'm really going to buy. Never happened. And it was around the end of 2018, 2019, where I heard about Decred for the first time, and I believe it was Murad. And I don't know if it was an episode of the Decred podcast that he had gone on, or if he had mentioned it to me over chat, or if I asked him about it. But I started hearing a lot of whispers about Decred around this time, and I was like, what is this Decred thing? And why are like people that I respect talking about it? The next one was Willy Woo. And so began my foray down the rabbit hole of Decred, which is not Checkmate. It's not Mr. Black. The other co-host of that podcast, Permable Nino, he talks about in one of his podcast episodes that if Bitcoin is like a rabbit hole, Decred is like a whole next level rabbit hole, because with the DAO, with the governance, with the gamification of time stamping, with Politeia, it just, when you understand Bitcoin, it's like this aha moment. But Decred is like another super aha moment, because a lot of what I'm going to be saying is things that I learned from videos, honestly. I started listening to all the Decred podcasts, all the videos that had been on the Decred YouTube channel, which the YouTube channel Decred, I'm glad that it started picking back up. But this was like during a time where like it was really dormant and there wasn't like a lot going on, but there was all these year-old videos at the time So it was like all these videos that were recorded in 2018, and it was like well-known figures in the space. It was, Willy Woo, it was Fluffy Pony, it was Charlie Lee. And I listened to a talk by Jake Yoakum when he's at Coinbase, and he's talking about Decred. And when you understand the investment thesis of Bitcoin, you understand that there's these 21 million coins, and basically the thesis, very simplified, is there's 21 million coins, there's money printing going on, you have the stock market at all-time highs, you have real estate market at all-time highs, and so you have this nascent new asset class that is very like, it's just a baby. And I think that's why so many young people are attracted to it, because they look around, they say, well, no, I'm not going to buy shares of Apple at a $2-3 trillion valuation. I don't have enough money for a down deposit on a home. They're just looking at everything that's going on. They're like, this is the best shot that I have. And I liked the thesis. I liked the hard money thesis. And that is what it is. That is the investment thesis. A store of value, global, unconfiscatable currency. And Decred had many similarities. Decred had the 21 million cap. As we've talked about before, they had an awesome development team. You learn that the developers are some of the like world-class developers. And so I started asking myself, you just start thinking like, what are the things that are important for a project after you've been in the space and you've seen this project is unsuccessful that I invested in, this one and is successful. You start thinking about, well, you need a community that's very strong. You need developers who are very talented. I believe that you absolutely have to have scarcity. If there's not scarcity or a fixed supply, like, to me, it's really not worth it. And Decred did this very strange thing where it bolted this second layer on top of proof of work. It kept proof of work, but it bolted this proof of stake layer on top. And what it allowed for was people to coordinate the protocol and make the protocol adaptable and upgradable over time. And in 2017, like if you came in during that time of Bitcoin, you didn't really know what was going on in terms of the forks and the communities and the governance. But by 2019, by the beginning of 2019, everything had really played itself out. And so you had like a lot of retrospection to look back and see, like, learn about Mike Hearn and learn about, all these different interest groups. What's his name? The Bcasher guy. I can't even remember. Roger Ver, right? Bear, whatever. And the Bitcoin maximalist during this time, it seemed like everyone was a Bitcoin maximalist. It was like the trendy thing to do. And my truth was always that I was more interested in making money than anything else. And so when I started hearing people talk about Decred, I was like, okay, this thing seems like it has some legs. And so I started doing my own research. I read the Constitution. I was listening to these podcasts. I just decided I'm just going to get some skin in the game. I'm going to dollar cost average into this thing. I don't know if it's going to work out. But I do want to have it in my portfolio. And hold on one second. I need a little drink of water. To me, Decred was a venture bet early on because it was a lot of promises. It was a very strong development team. but they had a roadmap and they had a vision and they had values. And you start thinking about what things differentiate properly a cryptocurrency from Bitcoin, right? You can't compete with Bitcoin on a proof of work network. You can't compete with it on liquidity, and you can't compete with it on, I guess, the first mover advantage of like name brand recognition. There had been so many attempts to try to like take the Bitcoin name, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Dark, Bitcoin this, that, and the other. Decred like separated itself by coming up with a name that was entirely different. And I liked Decred because it differentiated itself on a bunch of verticals that essentially a lot of other projects were not. And like the treasury would help with sustainability because you started to recognize that there was these deep entrenched interest, financial interest in Bitcoin and Ethereum because they were venture capital backed. You start seeing that if you can reward the developers in the community with the protocol, it has like a proper alignment of incentives. One thing that became abundantly clear as you like start clicking around the Twitterverse of the Decred community is that many of the members are, one, very intelligent, but two, also very open-minded, very data-driven, very open to logical argument. And I knew that community was very important. So you had the devs, you had the treasury, you had the community. I also started doing some research and I learned that proof of work, proof of stake hybrid was actually more secure than just pure proof of work because it took like, it's something like 20 times more secure on like a market cap equivalent basis. And so you realize that at some point Decred could actually pass Bitcoin in terms of security. You had the ability to coordinate built into the protocol from the very beginning. And so like on-chain governance, although it, to some people was a massive turnoff, to me, I saw it as a hedge because at some point I believed that Bitcoin will have another like very big hard fork. I think over base layer privacy, I think that would be the reason why there's a huge debate in a fork. And you start realizing that like the developers of Bitcoin, there's like a lot of egos and personalities and entrenched financial interests. And don't get me wrong, like these people really can't change Bitcoin to a certain degree, but you can definitely have another like community hard fork. And hard forking is kind of inevitable. I really liked if you want something to upgrade, if you want to change things in the code, like it is inevitable. And so I appreciated with Decred that there was a mechanism to do this in a coordinated and at least judicious way, if nothing less, you know, because it's judicious because it's properly based on a skin in the game dynamic, and everyone has an opportunity to have their voice heard and to vote. Not everyone's vote is equal, but it shouldn't be. If you own, 1% of the total supply of Decred, and that's your wealth, like it's arguable that you are going to care a lot more than the person who just owns one DCR. You're not likely to destroy the thing that has been providing you wealth and that your wealth is stored in. But two, that happens every time. Two, you should be able to exercise more voting sway over the protocol, in my opinion. And I started thinking about this idea of a DAO a lot. And I started thinking like, what new things does the fact that the Decred protocol is both a currency and kind of like a security, right? In a weird way, because it will have Lightning Network, it will be used in transactions. But because holding it also allows you to vote and influence the protocol, it also serves as like a governance token. So it also is kind of like a security in that way. And so you start asking yourself, like, what new things can you do with this? There had been, in my opinion, until Decred. Decred was essentially the first like proper DAO. I truly believe that. I mean, Ethereum had tried to launch a DAO and it went terribly wrong, and they had this huge fork over it. And silently, Decred had built the most elegant DAO, and it had been working and running, and it was, you know, efficient. And the concept of a DAO from a legal perspective, although I mean, I wasn't legally trained at the time, I still knew that I had interest in going to law school. And I still knew that it was going to be wildly disruptive if essentially you can have corporations, which are nothing more than a legal entity, but you had corporations that were not going to be answerable to any jurisdiction, right? There's no person that you could pull in front of a judge and blame for something that had happened in the DAO and hold liable for the DAO. Man, you just start thinking that whole new types of businesses can be built with Decred, and not just the DAO itself. Like, if my understanding of this thing is correct, you could set up your own sort of governance within Politeia, and you could use Decred to establish your own mini DAO, and it could do its own, have its own voting. It can use Politeia. It wouldn't do on-chain votes, but you could still like do proper voting based off of, how much Decred you hold. And you could do things like insurance. You could do, I can't really think of any other things right now, but you could do, I mean, gaming was something that seemed very interesting to me at the time. Still seems very interesting to me. And I believe that the next sort of step in man and like economics and international commerce is that we will start wanting to trade without corporations in between us. And Decred could serve as at least a currency that no one could stop you from using. And I'm not saying like a global reserve currency that everyone's going to use, but at least it had the ability to go cross border, and it was unstoppable and unseizable. And I also really liked the staking. I liked that there was like this reversion to old school banking in a way, because just by holding the currency and voting and participating in the governance, you were rewarded. And I thought that this created a very good game theory. And so you start thinking about how the game theory plays out with this thing. You get a protocol that pays the devs in the currency. You get holders and users of Decred who are accumulating the currency and want more and more of the currency. And essentially everyone, and then you have the miners who are buying hardware to secure the network and being rewarded in the currency. And so essentially everyone has the same goal, and thing that they want, and that is for the price of Decred to go up. And by forcing people to lock their Decred up to participate and then to get a reward back, I just knew that it was going to be very smart, because as the ticket price increased, one of the big concerns with Bitcoin is essentially, at least from like normies perspective, is that they're always worried that there's some big bag holder who's going to dump on you. And like normies usually just worry that they're, too late to the game. And with Decred, it created this weird mechanism where essentially the big bag holders are like incentivized to keep holding. Because if I ever save up for a ticket, right, like I'm never going to want to not be able to have a ticket. And so there weren't many projects that were actually working and that had like a working, you know, that actually had something that was out there in the wild working at that time. Like some of the big name projects were like Augur, Omisego, Zero X in 2017. Some of these things they didn't even have, they had nothing really. And here you had this blockchain that was its own blockchain that was working, that you can go and look on DCR data and see that it had usage. You can look at the metrics, see that the hash rate to me was a very big deal. The hash rate to me was probably the thing that made me realize, look, like people care about this thing. We go back, I'm looking on DCR data right now. In 2017, like right around 2018, the end of 2018 is when I said I got into it. From the end of 2018, from 2019 on, the hash rate just goes through it. I mean, it goes from looking at its low in this is December of 2018. It was at 122 petahashes. And then by July of 2019, it was at 595 petahashes. To me, that was just extremely, extremely bullish. And I watched that happen, and that let me know there are people who are putting skin in the game that care about this thing. I think it's one of the strongest like measures of a blockchain, because Decred has its own special algorithm. It's not like they can just take their ASICs from Bitcoin and just, start mining Decred. You have to have your own specific ASIC to mine this thing. And yeah, then things started happening within the community. Around this time, Checkmate came out. Permeable Nino started publishing some articles, and there just became so much good literature and intellectual curiosity around this project, which fueled my like imagination and encouraged me more and more to let me know that I was onto something that was I was on the right path. It's interesting where we sit now, September 14th, 2020. We've watched many, well, I'm not going to get into that. First, I do want to talk about my own portfolio, because these numbers are probably not like 100% accurate, but I'm pretty sure they're damn near close. If I were to look at my portfolio, it would be 65% Bitcoin, 25% Decred, and the rest like various shitcoin altcoin like gambles essentially. And I really do see them as gambles compared to Decred and Bitcoin, which I see as long-term stores of value. Like I feel like when I buy more Decred, it feels like putting money into a savings account. And I don't really even worry about that money because one, I know I'm not going to touch it for a long time. And two, I feel comfortable knowing that in at least 1 year, that money's going to have gone up, not down on a long enough time horizon. And it seems as though we're in the stages of an early bull market. There's a lot of DeFi degen behavior going around, and I know people in the Decred community seem to be rather split on Ethereum and whether it's something that is long-term viable. I would say most of the most like popular Decred holders and members of the community are kind of bearish on Ethereum long term. I'm not. I I mean, sure, could I do believe it's much riskier than something like Decred or Bitcoin. And I'm not also really even a fan of like investing in Ethereum. I actually don't like own any Ethereum, but I do own like some projects on top of Ethereum. Namely Numeraire or Numeraire, however you want to say it. I'm a very big fan of that project. Has a lot of usage. Maker, I'm a big fan of that. I own some Maker. I think it's um, very interesting, and I mean, so far it's working and out there in the wild, and people are using it. I was not a believer for a very long time. I was very skeptical, particularly around the governance, which I don't participate in at all. I thought it was way too like had too many venture capital interest in it, and early bag holders, and I thought it was too centralized essentially, and it might actually be. Um, Decentraland, I find just because gaming was always and still is to this very day part of my investment thesis and something that I'm passionate about. And let me just click on my MetaMask here, see what else I. Funfair. I forgot about Funfair. Yeah, I have some Funfair as well, and also some old Augur that I never got rid of, which I'm not a huge fan of that project anymore. But I just want to tell you guys this thing because this weekend I got very degenerate, and I do feel like we are in like this very early bull market. I think will be fueled by the likes of YFI type of distributed tokens. And I still don't have a very good grasp of what the heck is going on with that like project and that thing. But I do know that it feels like ICO all over again in terms of the frothiness and the pump and dumps and the make money quick, but like money here today, gone tomorrow sort of thing. Value here today, gone tomorrow. Just as someone who, like I said, my ultimate thing is to want to make money. Like that's it. I don't find any interest really in buying. There are very few stocks that I own. And interestingly enough, basically no technology stocks. I do own some like mining stocks. I own a gold miner, which has done extremely well this year. A silver miner, which has not done. It's just kind of it's done all right. oil explorer and a uranium explorer, or I guess miner. Very natural resource heavy, because I think that a lot of those things are just undervalued on a long enough time frame, 10 to 15 years. Um, yeah, and that's like really that's it. That's the only. Oh, I also own some like a commodity basket of agricultural commodity. It's like an ETN. Shout out Jim Rogers. Um, but traditional markets versus crypto markets, I'm probably about 75% in crypto, 25% in traditional assets. Um, and actually, probably more like a 90-10. Actually, when I start really thinking about it, yeah, it's definitely more like a 90-10. 90% crypto. But yeah, this weekend I got very degenerate, I have to admit. I got based. I still really don't understand it, but I just bought just a little bit, just like what? Just like $100 worth. So nothing crazy. And also, I bought a little bit of YFI, again, just like $100 worth, and of YFII, um, which I guess is like the Chinese version. But I just become I like those things because they seem like securities almost. I mean, they are. They're governance tokens. But I don't know. I don't really know what I don't know what it's all about. But sometimes when like it was the same thing with Decred. Like when I became curious enough, and I knew that I was gonna like try to figure out the protocol more, I went ahead and put money in, because I like you become more interested. You become more, I guess. I don't know. Once you have skin in the game, it just changes the dynamic, and you become like a lot more curious, and you become obviously a lot more biased as well. But I really try to remove my biases from these things as much as I possibly can. I never want to be emotionally attached to a project. I always want to be able to walk away. And I mean, it would be very hard to walk away from Bitcoin, and probably Decred at this point too. If I just had to walk away from one of them, it would be okay. I'd be like, oh, well, at least I have Decred. Whew. But if I had to walk away from both, I would like. I mean, that's a lot of my money. Um, so yeah, I'm also interested in like non-fungible tokens, digital art. Um, this last week, I got to play Light Night during the Jack Mallers live stream. I played. For those of you who don't know, Light Night is like a Fortnite type of game, except when you play, you win Bitcoin. And so I'll have in the description of however you're watching this a link to my affiliate, which if you want to play that game, it's in beta right now, but it's still so much fun. Like you can't play against people yet. It's not like multiplayer yet, but you can still go. They have like a COVID-19 level where you can go and like shoot COVID particles and you win sats for playing. It's dumb, but it's fun. Like I think that's the future. And when I think about Decred's role in that future, man, I think about the DEX. The DEX is going to be huge. I don't care what anyone says. Um, it's going to be very much on our community to make sure that we are making the DEX visible, that we're providing the liquidity that we have. That's why, to me, I'm like, I think that it's important that I be interested in other projects outside of Decred. And I think it's important for other Decred people to be interested in projects outside of Decred too, because the value proposition of Decred is like we don't need everyone to be a ticket holder, but the value proposition is still very good. It's one of a private store of value, which truthfully I don't think really exists. Um, I mean, you could argue Monero, but I think because of the inflation And I know it's very small inflation, but to me, I would rather store my wealth in something that does not have a permanent inflation. I know it's very minimal, but still. Um, Privacy, the decks, lightning, um, ticket splitting is on its way as well, from what I understand. So it's going to be easier for small guys like me to be able to just earn a little bit of decred with their small holdings. And yeah, I think decred has a very bright future. I think not enough people in the crypto space are really paying attention because Decred's not about hype. Decred is about action. Decred is about building things, and a lot of uh, moon boys are more interested in just like hype and instant gratification. And the Decred community is not that. And I think that's very bullish for me because it just lets me know that the market is extremely rational one. And so when I see just like lower prices and, I like this on the curve. I like that. I like when I see a curve that's going down and has a long, like just steady accumulation phase because that's rocket fuel. And I do think that Decred is positioning itself to be able to blow up. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've missed as to why I'm bullish on Decred. I don't think so. If I think of anything, I'll mention it in the next episode. But thank you guys for listening, for your continued support. Again, please rate and subscribe. Please throw me some Adams. I'm still trying to save up for my ticket. I'm getting very close. Next episode, I promise I'll let you guys know like where I'm at in terms of percentage of how close percentage wise I am to being able to get a ticket. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.